For this week's review, I decided to take a look at the 1996 disaster film Twister starring Bill Paxton and Helen Hunt. This is a movie that I really enjoyed as a kid when it first came out, and I watched it a bunch of times back then, but I probably haven't seen it in around 20 years, so I was curious how this will actually hold up upon revisiting, and surprisingly enough, this movie holds up pretty well. There are some errors that I found with it as an adult watching it, but still, if you're willing to turn your brain off, this is actually a pretty enjoyable popcorn flick. For people who don't know, who haven't seen it, the basic premise of this movie is Bill Paxton and Helen Hunt are two storm chasers on a team of storm chasers, and they're trying to get these new scientific sensors inside the core of a tornado so they can get scientific readings to better allow them to predict when and where tornadoes are going to occur. And all this is going on during an unusually high string of tornado activity around Oklahoma. But when I was watching this, I was just can't help but thinking the basic premise of this movie is they're trying to make tornadoes more predictable. But to the characters in this movie, the tornadoes are actually pretty predictable. They seem to know when and where they're going to occur. And after they touch down, they know what direction they're going to take. They do say how Bill Paxton's character is somehow just really good about predicting this sort of thing. But still, it seemed unusual that the whole point of this movie is to try to better predict tornadoes. And in this movie, only thing that we actually see as an audience is the tornadoes being very predictable. I was kind of young when I first saw this as a kid, so I didn't quite grasp the idea that this was supposed to be unusual tornado activity. I thought that's just how things were in Oklahoma, where there was just constant tornadoes one after the other. As an adult watching it is a little bit ridiculous just how many they encounter in such a short time frame. I think they don't really go outside of a huge area of operation, but even then, just in the span of a couple days, they encounter probably a half dozen tornadoes ranging from EF1s to EF5s. But, you know, this is a disaster movie, so they just kind of have to take what's normal and just really crank it up to 11. And they definitely do that for this movie because there's really no subtlety to it whatsoever. The tornadoes are more or less just created as freaks of nature, where they're just almost a monstrous entity, with the tornado literally having an animalistic roar. And that's something I really like with this movie, is the sound design in general, because it really does capture the intensity of the situation and sets the atmosphere really well. But the biggest selling point of this movie is the visual effects from Industrial Light and Magic. This movie was released nearly 30 years ago, but it looks like something that could be released even to today and no one would think otherwise. I mean, it just looks fantastic. It's not perfect, mind you, though. There are certain shots of the tornado where it looks a little bit janky. And the scene with the cows flying by is obviously an iconic scene for this movie, but the effects on the cows do look a little dated. But still, when you just look at the CGI they did for the weather, they really captured the intensity of the situation. And then you can combine that with the fact that they used a lot of practical effects for more of the up close stuff. And that just spells a movie that looks good all around. I do appreciate near the start of the movie, there's a scene where it goes around and kind of establishes all the individual characters within Bill Paxton and Helen Hunt's storm chasing crew. It doesn't go into a lot of detail because they are essentially background characters, but it does give you a little bit of information about each individual person, so you kind of understand who they are and what they're about. The only real standout they have within that group is Philip Seymour Hoffman's character, Dusty, and it's really just establishing that he's the comic relief character, but outside of that, there's really nothing else to him. But you can tell Philip Seymour Hoffman was having fun with the role, and the movie doesn't really try to make him out to be anything more than just that. I mean, they even say as much.
Dusty, why don't you explain to Melissa why you are the way you are?
Come on.
The character of Melissa is Bill Paxton's fiance in the movie, and she's an outsider to storm chasing, so the only real reason why she's included in the movie is just so characters can explain certain aspects of tornadoes to her, or she can ask questions about storm chasing and therefore get that information across to the audience without making it feel like it's just an exposition dump where two characters are just talking to each other and telling each other information that both of them would already know. Bill Paxton and Helen Hunt did a good job with their characters. In the movie, they're a couple finalizing their divorce, but you get a sense that there's still a spark left between the two of them, especially when they get out on the road and start doing their storm chasing stuff together. They definitely had some decent on-screen chemistry between the two of them, but near the first half of the movie, there was these constant bickering arguments back and forth between them. It did feel real, but it was also annoying because I don't want to just watch two people argue back and forth to each other. I think that the writers thought that this was supposed to be funny, and maybe you did find it funny, but me personally, I didn't. I think at best this was just kind of a time waste because it didn't really establish anything about the characters that we didn't already know. And at worst, this was somewhat grating. In fact, I think this is kind of indicative of the biggest flaw of this movie is just what's going on between the tornado encounters, because those sequences are fantastic. And like I said, the effects are the standout of this movie. But when you get past that, when you're not actually in those sequences where they're chasing tornadoes, well, there's really not a whole lot else there. Yeah, you do get these interactions between the characters, and some of them are good and they do play off of each other quite well. Outside of that, though, there's really not a whole lot of substance, and between the tornado encounters, it does feel like the movie is just kind of stopping and going. I wouldn't let that dissuade you from enjoying this movie, though, because even though some of the character interactions are kind of annoying, it's really not frequent enough to really take away from anything, because the tornado encounters do happen pretty consistently throughout the movie. And even though it does feel like it's kind of spinning its wheels between then, I think there's still a lot here to enjoy if you just want to watch the spectacle of this sort of situation. And that's why I will recommend this movie a 7 out of 10. If I was to rate this for a nostalgic factor, I'd probably bump it up to an 8. But for general audiences, I will recommend it as a 7. But let me know what you think about this movie in the comment section below. Do you like the original Twister movie? Is it a nostalgic movie for you like it is for me? And what do you think about the upcoming Twisters movie? Are you interested in seeing that, or are you just going to pass on that one? Let me know in the comment section. And also, if you haven't already, make sure you click that subscribe button if you want to stay up to date with the latest entertainment news, or if you want to check out some more of my movie reviews. And if you haven't already, make sure you click that like button and share the video because it really helps out with the channel. Thank you.